Real estate. Transcript of sections of a brief discussion of market trends and forces in land inheritance, economic trending use, acquisition and ownership, by Kel Brandon-Costerno. And so owing to its unique efficacy, reports of what came to be described as psychovirus KCN 17368G was positively identified only at rare intervals in the accumulated multidata of Roma decay, as it was never recognized for what it actually was, or those that had recognized it were rapidly dispossessed of their communication facilities. As such, it had gathered somewhat of a mythical status amongst the microbiologists, social anthropologists and historians concerned with power balance and economic flow in that sector in that particular 12-light-year historical zone. There were many competing theories about the nature of that phenomenon. If it had been, as some suggested, a word-of-mouth ideological object, then that would account for its rapid system-hopping progress around all the M-class worlds in that zone, like El Chupacabra on Old Sol Prime, sightings and imagined or simulated evidence of which traveled all across the Hispanic regions of the Southern Americas within a matter of months in the latter 20th century. Similarly, the sparse accounts of the phenomena were equally contradictory and confusing. Variously described as mass hypnosis, or the influence of progressively toxic chemtrace and constant covert integration with basic societal or planetary sustenance feeds, CO2, H2O, proteins or carbohydrates etc., by native, extra-social or extraplanetary renegades, partisans or ahem, invaders. Hearsay or lay descriptions describe it as a progressive change of behavior or thinking and social structuring, or belief system if you will, whilst some of the sparse scientific accounts describe an actual devolutionary cycle which seems to occur very rapidly over 2 or 3 generations in humanoids and a lot faster in other species, manifesting itself in vastly different forms and different contexts, and this is where much of the confusion and disagreements lay, as to what precisely it was, organic or ideational, if it existed at all as a single describable phenomenon, so wide-ranging were its manifestations. The most discredited were some conspiracy theorists who described it as a genetically engineered alien psychological or telekinetic virus to perform sector-wide velvet invasions over just a few generations, and its behavior, according to some of the few accessible pattern and flow charts, do make it resemble a fungus or cancer which consumes and devours everything in its path, leaving nothing but hollowed-out shells of what once were variously sentient-based, agrarian and technocratic civilizations. The body snatcher plague or zombie curse, as it was once described, but without particular outward signs. But repeated reports of marked genetic simplification and restructuring are very common, as if all the organisms it comes into contact with actually unevolve if suitably advanced, to a stage of mere simple existence, but not on any sentient level, more that of an invasive plant such as Convolvulus or Fallopian japonica or the rhododendron, which is poisonous and antagonistic to all other plant life also. Perhaps the most intriguing of all are the numerous accounts of mass cult-like behaviors resembling those related to theological or theopolitical belief systems, where groups, as they grow in number, gradually become more aggressive and again antagonistic to the host species or society, eventually eliminating or consuming the host entirely. These descriptions lead to the locust or cuckoo in the nest analogies, perhaps even reminding one of phenomena such as National Socialism, or the neurotoxin plagues, respective regimes of fear, intimidation and terror. One analyst interestingly attributed a number of supposed entertainment fictions to be in fact thinly veiled analogous accounts of the phenomena in situ as it gradually moved into several host worlds. Also one historical parallel account of the Spanish invasion of the Americas and the European invasions of Australia and the North Americas respectively, where the aboriginals were either naive to the true threat embodied in the visitors or migrants, or unable to resist the greater technological force, or being unresistant to diseases borne by the invading force. Ultimately the situation is the same, a native population unable or unwilling to defend itself. The repeating theme was that of some kind of Trojan, a malign invader which destroys from the inside, like a disease, organism against itself either by sentient strategy, genetic programming, a system of behaviors and ideas. In mythology and narratives, body snatchers, vampires, brainwashing, death cults, seems to home in on weakness and anxieties. If it was a highly sophisticated ruse to base a historically long-term intergenerational invasion and land acquisition cult on the model of a belief system. The plan is essentially simple, the aim being to control and occupy all land masses and all water and sea farming and trade routes and fishing rights on an entire planet, base an economic mind control system on a range of pre-existing belief systems in a particular area, like the Romans did, and then indoctrinate the local populace into a mind control cult system which has all the appearance of a belief system which represents a divine figure or godhead who promises all one might desire, health, wealth, beauty, longevity, infinite procreation, immortality whatever, in an afterlife with the simple rule of complete acquiescence to the simple laws of the belief system, the simple laws being to only think the writings and rules of that belief system, and nothing else, and to reproduce as many meme-carrying organisms of the same species as possible within the lifespan so as to eventually fill up all the possible spaces on the landmass with meme-carrying drones. Rather like a fungus or a cuckoo in the nest. Except in this case the chick eats the other eggs or chicks and eventually it eats T, once large enough the parent troll bird also. It swept across an entire sector of M-class worlds in a matter of 120 years leaving dead husks of worlds. The consensus is at present that the phenomena definitely must involve an intelligence which immediately, perhaps telepathically identifies the vulnerability or Achilles heel in any particular species, be it physiological, psychological or technological and adapts itself accordingly. A high sentience advanced technology reduced to cannibalism and ritual ideological mass murder owing to a sudden acutely pathological turn towards extreme ideological and behavioral conservatism, some kind of regression to a primitive hive mind form of behavior, the terror. She described the people as no longer being human, there being no light in their eyes. Slowly everyone stopped laughing, no one ever enjoyed themselves, sex was solely for reproductive purposes and never for pleasure, any form of pleasure was punishable by public stoning and slow robotic dissection, the pleasure guard. Sounds like a joke to us, but this form of surveillance has in fact been common in many regimes. Divide and rule. Where the population is kept in a state of permanent confusion by endless contradictory information and reporting of facts. Some of the forms it took in more advanced societies were almost absurd, and sounded like they had been invented at random, it being the form of the Trojan weapon not its content. The prohibition of a particular color, or the most common, natural word or action which set forth exponential consequences. Among the more outlandish theories that it actually alters time rather than devolving the victims or that it directly affects parts of the brain involved in memory, cognition, and empathy, morality, the things that make us human in effect. Among the symptoms are severe delimitation of new stimuli and information results in marked loss of function in particular parts of the brain. And the delimitation of the quality of that information. In terms of communicational complexity and conceptual or cognitive level it eventually declining to that of a 2 to 3-year-old. Which oddly has reported a greater sense of well-being in many groups who can't experience things that don't have a name. So we end up with a very simplified sub-binary mode of thinking. There not being even any options or opposites or alternatives in the language and hence thinking any longer, a world of one-dimensional absolutes. All culture or other thought is criminal. All action apart from breeding is crime. There are shrines to the twisty spear phallus of that species everywhere one looks. And 5 times a day the adherents are called to procreate at the temples and the holy booths where the females waddle in and place their flower glands against the holy grills where the seed of all the males are flushed every 3 minutes. Inbred, pedophiles a lower order, more primitive regressive gene. Anti-evolutionary cult invented by aliens to avoid invading themselves, then at the point they wish to colonize they instruct the devotees to kill themselves in great rituals of semiosis. They breed with their children, although vaguely humanoid the females are already able to give birth after only 3 years, on the planets they invade all the natives are terrified of being branded as evolutionists. There are accounts of evolutionists being ostracized by their own communities and in a few rare cases literally being ritually ripped limb from limb by the social pack, as there is a powerful fear and panic-inducing pheromone carried by all the females of the invading species which makes them seem impossibly attractive to all members of the native species, at once like the most beautiful infants engaging fierce protective impulses but simultaneously sourcing their unconscious ideas of the most beautiful of their own species. These are rumors. People are not sure if it is an idea or a pheromone. To the natives it smells delightful, to visitors, or non-natives it is repulsive, and the creatures appear monstrous. Like locusts, the aliens genetically engineer low IQ facsimiles of the native race that ostensibly appear to be of the dominant race but are essentially just breeding organs on legs with the faculty to speak and act like the native species, using a hive mind simple set of instructions for basic economic utilization of whatever system is available. Divide and conquer. Give me 50 years and they will be feeding their own children to our drones. They appear as the cutest, most adorable infants, but to visitors they appear grotesque. A woman was thought of as mad when she was not susceptible to the pheromones and threw her baby out of the window of a 560th story. It survived by shape-shifting halfway down. Male butt-shifting pheromone ritual keeps it in circulation. 2 sebaceous glands. It operates slightly differently in high-technology species and with low or no-tech species. The humans decided to use combative, anticipatory tactics by developing accelerated, programmed gene technology, totally separate from the theocratic and blind government who were only concerned about their own power and wealth, with no concern whatsoever about their own people or culture or values. Some wondered if their own government were not in fact also alien invaders. People were actually trying to tell people the earth was round. Plague, contagion. Anthropologists described it as a devolutionary psychovirus outbreak. The story is that there are 2 ancient freeze-dried humanoid heads full of silk webs in a hermetically sealed vault in Whitehall, that can speak without moving their lips, and appear to exhibit sentient thought. One theory was that they are 4-dimensional antennae, or that they are holy relics and their noses bleed with the blood of a saint. Another story is that one particular humanoid species had actually suddenly evolved and split into 2 distinct and incompatible species, one distinctly more primitive in terms of cognitive capacity. They won't be doing any rocket science today. They called it the lazy invasion, or the slug Trojan, after the species that invented it. It might have been devised by the greatest of war theoreticians, as it took no loss of one's own fighting force, no soldiers, no landcraft or spacecraft, and most importantly little expenditure. The only cost was time. But in the conquering of entire galactic sectors, time is of little relevance in the big picture.